Hey guys, it's Caroline. Welcome to my channel. We're out here in Waco for the Waco Annual Charity Open, and today we are going to watch a video that we compiled of my Las Vegas challenge rounds, and we're going to talk about and react to what happened. Let's get started. So we have the videos compiled together for my Las Vegas challenge. We're going to start on the end of a course, round 2 on hole 1. Let's go ahead and watch it. So this shot, I liked the angle out of the hand, but not quite for the wind. So we had a tailwind on this hole, and I threw my blue Discraft Page Pierce nuke, and it's my more stable out of the two. And the issue with this shot was it didn't get enough flip, and so I ended up behind that tree instead of pushing towards the pin. All right, we're gonna go ahead and look at the next one. So this is hole 3. So I was told on this hole, you can't really see it in the video, but there's porta potties way off to the right. I was told if you throw something stable off to the right, it'll just filter to the basket if you throw it nice and hard. I did that, didn't do it, right? It pushed super straight all the way to out of bounds. And we threw this disc so many times in practice, and we put it about circle's edge, and I was like, oh, sure. During the tournament, it'll get to the pin. It didn't, which is a-okay, because we ended up changing in the next round. All right, we skipped up to hole 5. This is a great example of what a nose-up forehand looks like a super stable disc nose-up forehand. The play was to push a little bit straighter and have the disc kind of turn and then land in the green. I wanted to keep this up shot because this was actually an overcorrection of what I did on the tee. So I actually kept the nose down too much, and so I just ended up throwing it to the ground, and thankfully it didn't go OB, right? It kind of circles around and sits. I was so nervous. I was like, I just did that. As you can tell from my face, not super happy. Next clip is going to be hole 9. This is a great example of what uncommitment looks like, which is okay. You know, it happens to everybody. The intention was to throw something flat over those palm trees, and I just yanked it to the right side. That disc was a grace. During this round, for whatever reason, it's not common, I was having a nose-up issue. I usually, if I make a mistake, I throw it into the ground, and this one was up high, and unfortunately that puts me in the hazard because it was just a little bit too short. It's kind of the same thing off the tee a couple holes back. All right, hole 11. This, I believe, was a headwind. It was like a left-right headwind, and I ended up putting a little bit too much anti-angle on it, and it was a bomb, don't get me wrong. It was a really great shot if we were in an open field, but it ended up turning a little bit too much and then floating it out of bounds. We're on hole 14. So in this shot, we had a tailwind, and so I grabbed my Hades. We were gonna put this on like a big flex line, and for whatever reason, I didn't throw it high enough. That was kind of the bottom line, but looking back at it, I should have thrown either my orbit grace or a grace that was a little bit more stable, just to be safe. I'd rather be left than out of bounds. We did make that correction in round 4 when we went to Innova. Same hole, and this was another disc choice error. This whole round was disc choice errors. We again had the tailwind, and I tried to put like an anti-flex on it, but this D2 didn't quite get over. And so I ended up on the left side. It wasn't a bad spot to be in, but again, I would rather have thrown a grace now knowing. That way it had that nice turn, and then it would have settled instead of just tailing off left. Now we're on hole 16. This is an envy. So envies, at least I thought an envy should push straight and then kind of finish. This envy did not do that. This envy pushed straight and then started turning. And so instead of kind of, you know, going at the trees and starting to stable out, it just kept turning and went OB. So I would have, at this point, lesson learned, I should have grabbed a PA3 because I would have known it would have stabled out. Same thing in envy. This is a different hole, hole 17. This is the upshot. and you'll see it kind of does the same thing, right? I put it on the line and then it turns and then we get to C2. So I took that disc out of my bag immediately. It's not a throwing putter anymore for me. Hole 18, same thing. It was that right-left wind, and the idea was to throw it on Annie and have it ride. Didn't. So I guess I probably was a little bit too nose up, and so it just trailed off into the hazard area. All right, we're back on the end of a course for round 4, hole 1. Yeah. That disc was thrown well too low. I didn't mind the angle if I threw it about like 40 feet higher, which is okay. We'll make mistakes. Right, left wind, it should have kind of rode and then came back if it had the height. So this is the upshot. This is my harpoon. I wanted to show a good shot because a lot of these have been a little rough. My idea was if I threw something stable, it would just kind of hit into the hill and sit. And that's the beauty of the harpoon. It doesn't skip. It just sits nice and happy. Except for this shot. So same harpoon, kicks up, rolls all the way to 30 feet, and it put me at a headwind putt. So this is hole 3. This is me trying to correct the mistake I made from round 1. That's a PA1, so it's still kind of stable. My idea was to put it high and have it kind of stable, in which it did. It did push a little long. The wind carried it a little longer than I expected to. We're back at hole 5. I wanted to put this in here because this is what a well-executed forehand on this shot looks like. It's a nice flat angle out of the hand, it's a nuke, and it's gonna push, ride, and it's gonna stable out in the middle. For this wind on this shot, I believe it was a headwind, and so I grabbed a felon, which I wanted to keep it on hyzer, but I think I threw it a little bit too close to flat, and you'll see at that moment, it had that drift, which put me about 30 feet past the basket, and I didn't want that. Like I wanted it to stay on hyzer, skip off the green, and just kind of ride to the basket. But we're gonna have another shot here on. It's gonna be a lot like that. All right, hole 6. So the idea of this shot was to put a little bit of Annie on it, and I ended up pulling it. And so the wind was, yeah, it was a left-right wind, so it had no chance of going back. Once it got that far out over the water, no chance, even though it's a stable zone. This is my Orbit Grace. This was a really well, in my opinion, a really well executed shot. The idea was to throw it on hyzer a little high and have it like flip maybe almost to flat and then come out. Because like with hyzers, you don't want them, like if you're trying to do a pushing hyzer, you don't want them to get to flat because that's when they start dumping. Like you want them to kind of, flip to a little bit of hyzer, push, 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 and then come out of it. And that's what that did. The upshot on hole 7. Super windy. Had to make sure I put it right because I knew the wind was going to push it back left. This was hole 9. So previous to this shot, I threw a grace because in round 2, I threw a grace and I just threw it to the tree. It was not okay. But this time I threw a less stable grace and it just kept pushing straight. So I ended up in the trees like super straight. And I had this awkward forehand shot. Like I could have done the backhand, but it wasn't going to go anywhere. Like I wasn't going to save par. So instead, I risked it for the biscuit, and I made it. It was such a good forehand, nose down. It had that nice turn. Wonderful nuke. Nice little pick up and roll. Unfortunately, this round was super windy, so I had to pitch up instead of putt. So save my par. Excellent par save. Coolest shot of my entire life. All right, hole 10. We had a great wind for this hole. I believe it was a tailwind, and so this time I actually got it over, and so it kind of rode, and it was a bomb. Like, it's the furthest I'd been up on that hole the entire tournament, even in my practice rounds. So it kind of made the upshot a little bit different, because I didn't know where to go, or I didn't know what to use, and so I was like, I'll use this disc. And I believe it will be a nuke when it comes up. Yes. So we had the headwind on this hole. Never mind, it was a headwind, not a tailwind. My apologies. But the disc, instead of staying on hyzer and kind of skipping off the green, which is the plan, it flipped up because of the wind and it pushed a little bit too far, so I ended up in the hazard. If I would go back, I would throw my more stable Ezra nuke. Like, this is a Paige Pierce nuke, and it's lightweight, so it's gonna go further, but lessons learned. This is my Paige Pierce nuke. I threw the same disc. The wind, I believe, was still a headwind. I just didn't put as much angle on it as I did the last round. That's what I learned. Ended up in a great spot. This throw, this throw was the worst throw of my entire life, which is okay. It all happens. I've been throwing my forehands nose down all day long, and you will see it's nuts, super high. Immediately OB. I didn't even want to watch it out of the hand, and we actually left that disc. I was like, I don't even want it. So this was a left-right wind. All my card mates had thrown OB, right? They all pushed it too far right. They all had stable disc, but the wind shoved it down, and it had this weird anti-skip / roll into the water. And mine did the same thing. I couldn't believe it. I wasn't mad about the throw, but I literally said when I got off the tee, I was like, you just pulled it right like everybody else. So in left-right winds, it's more ideal to put it towards the middle because you know the disc is going to get shoved down. I hope you all enjoyed the video. I wanted to do a recap of my Las Vegas challenge and everything that I learned, and hopefully if y'all ever go to the course or if you're ever in situations that I was in, it'll be helpful for you too. On to the rest of the video.
Just found out you're on feature card for Friday, playing with Paige, Kristen, and Lucky. How are we feeling about going into Friday?
I think it's exciting and neat to finally get to play with Paige and Kristen. I didn't think it was going to happen so quick. When Kristen won Worlds last year, we bought her Tour Series World Champion Orbit Grace. It's red. And I told myself, the first time I ever get to play with her, I'm gonna have her sign that disc. And so I didn't end up bringing it, I forgot it. And so thankfully, CJ, my husband's parents, are coming and they're gonna bring the disc for her to sign. So it's kind of cool that it's happening this early. But Kristen has similar skill sets to me as well. And Paige's backhand is always awesome. So it'll be really cool to, play with some really elite women. My putt feels better than last week. We spent 2 weeks, or the 2 weeks after Las Vegas, kind of figuring out and correcting the problem, which was more just a tempo thing. So like sometimes when you get nervous, and I kind of learned this with Nita, you start talking really fast because you're really nervous. And that's kind of what I was doing with my putting at Vegas. And I know now to be more aware of it. And I also kind of figured out that 0 point where you bring the disc into your hips and then pop it out. The backhand still feels really good. My forehand feels better now than it did in Las Vegas. So that's super exciting because this course in the woods, it's really nice to have a forehand. That way you can look at the guts and stuff. So I'm really fortunate. Everything feels great.
There were a couple of changes since the last time you played the Waco course. Anything you looking interesting out there? We had a raised basket on hole 2.
A little mean, but I get it. Makes things interesting. Raised baskets are tough. It's been sunny and windy. It's always going to be windy in Waco. I guess it's the degree of wind, but it hasn't been that bad. And it's supposed to not be bad until Sunday, but I don't know if we'll beat the wind or not, being the early morning cards.
What's your tee time?
I don't know. I don't know, like 11:30, 9:20. Yeah, for all my local friends that will be out, that intend on coming out to watch Waco, my tee time's at 9:20. You're more than welcome to watch. Come say hi to me after the round, and we can talk about how everything goes and stuff like that. It'll be great. It's really cool to be on a feature card in Texas for my first local tournament. It's really awesome. I'm really happy that PDGA, Legit, and Prodigy, and I guess whoever the last person is, I'm glad the odds were in my favor.